roguelike game is a genre of video games characterized by procedurally generated levels, turn-based gameplay, permadeath, and often dungeon-crawling elements. Players navigate through ever-changing, randomly generated environments, facing challenging enemies and collecting items along the way. With each playthrough offering a unique experience, roguelike games provide a high level of replayability and a sense of accomplishment for overcoming the inherent difficulty and unpredictability of the gameplay. But before we jump to the list, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay updated on all things about low-end gaming.
People are counting on me.
Astral Ascent is a 2D platformer roguelite game set in a modern fantasy world. You can choose one of 4 heroes with different weapons and abilities to escape from an astral prison guarded by 12 bosses, the Zodiacs. The game features stunning pixel art, dozens of unique spells, local and online co-op modes, and a story that unfolds as you play.
The galaxy will...
Ember Knights is an action roguelite game for 1-4 players where you play as legendary knights, the last spark of hope against the mad sorcerer Praxis and his hordes of unwavering fiends. You can wield weapons and skills, build synergies with game-changing relics, and free the universe of Praxis corruption. The game features pixel graphics, fast-paced combat, epic bosses, and local and online co-op modes. Rogue Legacy is a platform game with roguelike and Metroidvania elements. You play as a hero who tries to explore a randomly generated dungeon and defeat 4 bosses. Each time you die, you can choose one of your heirs to continue the adventure. Each heir has unique traits and abilities that affect the gameplay. You can also upgrade your equipment and skills with gold you find in the dungeon. Luck Be a Landlord is a roguelike deck-builder game where you use a slot machine to earn rent money and defeat capitalism. You can customize your slot machine with different symbols, each with their own effects and interactions. You can also buy items that give you various benefits and abilities. One Step from Eden is a roguelike action game that combines strategic deck building and real-time combat with roguelike elements. You can choose from 9 different characters, each with their own unique spells and abilities, and fight your way through a randomly generated dungeon full of enemies and bosses. You can also play with a friend in local or online co-op mode, or challenge other players in PvP mode. Super House of Dead Ninjas is a platform game with roguelike elements. You play as the Crimson Ninja who tries to escape from a tower filled with enemies and traps. You have a 30-second timer that resets when you reach a new floor or use a special item. You can also collect and upgrade various weapons and abilities to help you survive. Loop Hero is a roguelike video game that combines deck building and real-time combat. You play as a hero who tries to restore the world after an evil lich destroyed it. You use cards to place enemies, terrain, and buildings along a loop, where you fight and collect loot. You can also upgrade your base and unlock new classes and abilities. Death Must Die is a roguelite hack and slash game where you descend the nether in search of Death himself. You can choose from different heroes, weapons, and skills and collect items and relics to create powerful synergies. The game features pixel art graphics, fast-paced combat, and local and online co-op modes.
Mortal man once again trod the forgotten halls, living flesh that must...
Crawl is a brawler indie game with roguelike, bullet hell, and Metroidvania elements. You can play as a human hero who explores a dungeon full of traps and monsters controlled by up to 3 other players or bots. If you die, you switch roles with the player who killed you. The game ends when a hero reaches level 10 and defeats a final boss.
Again and again he cut me down, and I was tickled to see a trace of hope in his eyes.
Skull. The Hero Slayer is a roguelike action platformer game where you play as Skull, a skeleton soldier who tries to rescue the Demon King and his minions from the heroes. You can swap your skull with different ones that you find, giving you new abilities and fighting styles. The game has pixel art graphics, randomly generated levels, and various enemies and bosses. Synthetic. Legion Rising is a top-down shooter game with roguelike elements. You play as an android who fights against a machine legion and their gods in a world overrun by them. You can customize your weapons and skills and play with a friend in online co-op mode. The game is inspired by the Mega Man Battle Network series and has pixel art graphics and a dynamic soundtrack. Grifflands is a roguelike deck-building game with role-playing elements. You can choose one of the predefined characters and explore a sci-fi world full of quests, enemies, and allies. You can use cards to fight or negotiate your way through various situations. The game is developed and published by Clay Entertainment, the same studio behind Don't Starve and Oxygen Not Included. Shogun Showdown is a turn-based combat game with roguelike and deck-building elements. You play as a samurai who tries to escape from a prison guarded by the shogun and his army. You can choose from different attack tiles, upgrade them, and combo them to defeat your enemies. The game features pixel art graphics, 6 islands with 11 enemy types and 8 bosses, and local and online co-op modes. Cult of the Lamb is a roguelike action game with base building and dark humor elements. You play as a lamb who is saved from death by a mysterious entity called the One Who Waits, and must repay your debt by creating and leading a cult of woodland creatures. You can explore different regions, recruit followers, build your base, and fight against other cults and enemies. Boydigo is a roguelike action game with pixel art graphics and dynamic boss battles. You can use different weapons and power-ups to fight against the corruption of the Void. Nova Drift is a roguelike action game that combines classic arcade space combat with strategic deck building. You control a biomechanical ship that evolves as you defeat enemies, allowing you to customize its weapons and abilities. Downwell is a roguelike action game with pixel art graphics and dynamic boss battles. You play as a young person who ventures down a well in search of treasures, using your gunboots to shoot and stomp enemies. Crypt of the Necrodancer is a roguelike rhythm game that combines dungeon exploration with music-based gameplay. You have to move and attack on the beat of the soundtrack, composed by Danny Baranowski, or your own MP3 songs. You can play as different characters, each with their own abilities and challenges, and use various weapons and items to fight enemies and bosses.
Never defeat me. You will never escape.
Monster Train is a roguelike deck-building game with a twist. You play as a hero who tries to restore the world after an evil Lick destroyed it. You use cards to place enemies, terrain, and buildings along a loop, where you fight and collect loot. You can also upgrade your base and unlock new classes and abilities. Streets of Rogue is a roguelite video game that combines fast-paced top-down action with free-form, experimentation-driven gameplay. You can play as one of many different characters, each with their own abilities and goals, and explore a randomly generated city full of enemies, allies, and opportunities. You can also play with your friends in local or online co-op mode. Risk of Rain 2 is a roguelike third-person shooter game where you and up to 3 friends can fight your way through hordes of frenzied monsters on an alien planet. You can collect and combine over 110 items to boost your power and survive the increasing difficulty. FTL. Faster Than Light is a roguelike game where you control a spaceship and its crew on a mission to deliver critical information to the Federation. You have to manage your ship systems, fight enemies, and deal with random events. The game is challenging and has permadeath, meaning you have to start over if your ship is destroyed. Enter the Gungeon is a bullet-hell dungeon crawler with roguelike elements. You can play as one of 4 characters, each with their own abilities and goals, and explore a randomly generated dungeon full of enemies and bosses. The game is challenging and has permadeath, meaning you have to start over if your ship is destroyed.
Listen, boss.
Inscription is a card-based game that combines the genres of deck building, roguelike, escape room, and psychological horror. You play as a person who is trapped in a cabin with a mysterious card master, Leshy, and must use cards to fight and escape. The game has a dark and disturbing story that unfolds as you play, and it is full of secrets and puzzles. Potato is a game where you play as a potato who can handle up to 6 weapons at the same time. You have to fight against aliens and survive until help arrives. The game is a top-down arena shooter roguelite with pixel art graphics and various items and characters to choose from. The Binding of Isaac. Rebirth is a game that combines action, RPG, shooter, and roguelike elements. You play as Isaac, a boy who tries to escape from his mother who wants to sacrifice him to God. You explore a randomly generated dungeon full of enemies, secrets, and bosses, and collect items that change your appearance and abilities. Dead Cells is a game that combines the genres of roguelike and Metroidvania. You play as a creature that can possess different bodies and explore a changing castle full of enemies and secrets. The game has permadeath, meaning you lose all your progress when you die, but you can also unlock permanent upgrades and new paths. Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck-building game where you try to climb a spire of randomly generated floors, fighting enemies and bosses with cards. You can choose from 4 different characters, each with their own unique cards and relics. The game is challenging and has permadeath, meaning you have to start over if you die.
I told you nobody gets out of here.
Hades is a roguelike game from Supergiant Games, creators of Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre. You play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, who tries to escape from the underworld with the help of the other Olympians. The game features fast-paced action, a rich story, and a dynamic soundtrack. Vampire Survivor is a gothic horror casual game with roguelite elements, where your choices can allow you to quickly snowball against the hundreds of monsters that get thrown at you. The game was developed and published by Ponkel, and it is available on Steam and itch.io.